The Prime Minister met the Chinese leader in the last few hours. I want to get some analysis with Lowy Institute Senior Fellow for East Asia, Richard McGregor. Richard, as the Trump administration or incoming administration set to turn the rules-based order on its head, the Chinese making a push for diplomacy at APEC and G20, what's happening?
Yeah, well, certainly China is attempting to turn it into a propaganda windfall for themselves. It's obviously for Australians a little bit rich to hear Chinese lectures about free trade after what's happened in recent years between China and Australia. And of course, China's economy is well protected where the government decides it should be. But by the same token, I think China can make quite a deal out of this. Trump is seen globally as a more disruptive force. China is good at the narrative discourse that they're in favour of freer and open trade. So we'll see where it lands, but certainly that's China's aim.
So it's not just trade we're talking about. There are strategic implications of what's going on here as well, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I would see, if you look at Australia and the US, for example, under Trump looking ahead, we are still going to have whatever he says about AUKUS. We're going to have deepening and intensifying security ties, but that's going to be alongside much more discordant, possibly combative economic ties, depending if Trump goes ahead with tariffs on all countries, including Australia, and depending whether he does put extra high tariffs on China. And strategic, as you say, strategy these days is not just cover defence and national security. It covers what is fashionably known as geoeconomics, trade. Strategy encompasses all of that. And so it's a very, quite a needle for Australia to thread, actually.
It is indeed. And parallel to this, you've got that the climate talks underway and China again having, I was going to say oversized, but it's probably not oversized given the massive population it has, but a major impact there in terms of the ongoing discussions. And they are the biggest player in renewable energy by a long way. They've still got nuclear and coal, but the renewable investment is, in some respects, dwarfs investment elsewhere.
Yes, China's the biggest player in coal. It's the biggest player in nuclear, in building new nuclear-powered stations. I think 22 are under construction in China. And it is by far and above the biggest player in various aspects of green energy, be it batteries, be it EVs, electric vehicles, or solar panels and the parts of solar panels. So in the green industrial economy in particular, it's very hard to see any country decarbonising, if that's what they want to do, without tapping into Chinese supply chains, no matter what the US does. So that is also, I mean, if you look at the way Mr. Albanese has spoken in South America, he's really spoken about areas where, he says, standing up for the national interest, where we disagree with Mr. Trump on trade and, of course, on climate. So there's lots of possibilities of divisions between Canberra and Washington on that. I think they're manageable, but there'll be some headlines.
Finally, before you go, we're almost out of time, but those consular matters, the young Heng Jun who remains in captivity, is there any sign of progress there? Any sign of the Chinese willing to bend on that particular case?
Look, it's very hard to know. I would only be speculating. I think in many respects it depends on Mr. Young's health. If he is seriously ill, as was possibly mooted by his family and supporters a few months ago, it may be that he's allowed out on a medical leave, as it were. If his health is okay, I'd be surprised if he's let out very soon.
Yeah, okay. And then the Prime Minister invited to return next year to Beijing, which would be interesting given the many years of the freeze, that would see his second visit there in the matter of a couple of years, if he does win the election come early next year, Richard.
Well, one of the interesting things about the election, Kieran, and you're far better placed than me to judge this, but I think that, you look at the polls, the government is struggling. I think they see the stabilisation of the relationship with China, so-called, as an advantage in the election, particularly in seats which they won, like Reid, Bennelong in Sydney, Chisholm, and later Ashton by-election in Melbourne. Large Chinese Australian populations. I think there's a pitch from the government of these populations as part of their re-election effort.
Lowy Institute Senior Fellow for East Asia, Richard McGregor. Great to chat as always. Thank you.
Thank you.